Good morning. Thank you for joining us for our American Horse Council Annual Conference. I'm Julie Broadway. I'm president at the council, and we are delighted to have you attend this session. I'm sorry we can't be together in person, but when we surveyed our members, they clearly told us that they were not quite ready to commit to travel yet. So here we are again for 2021 doing a virtual event. But hopefully we've all had enough practice with Zoom that this will go smoothly. I can honestly say that almost all the meetings I've done of late have been virtual, and they've all had some technical glitches, so I anticipate we'll have one too, so just bear with us. For those of you who are first-time attendees, just a brief overview of the American Horse Council and our mission and our governance structure. The council was formed in 1969 to serve as the voice of the equine industry in Washington, D.C. We are a bipartisan advocacy organization that seeks to address the social, economic, and legislative interests of the U.S. equine industry. As you know, probably like me, have no doubt that the industry is very diverse and can sometimes be splintered on issues. Thus, our goal is to work on issues where the industry has consensus or can coalesce around a solution. When the industry is split on an issue, we try to avoid divisiveness by speaking to all sides of that subject, but we do remain neutral on that matter. Today, you're going to hear a variety of topics, and we hope you will find this informative, educational, and useful. A couple of logistics just to make this go smoothly and ensure everybody has the best experience. Please be sure to mute yourself so that we can eliminate any background noise. We are recording this session and it will be available for replay following the conference. And we will be using the chat feature according to Zoom. If you go to the bottom of your screen, you will find a chat box. We're going to be holding questions to the end. So feel free to fill in your questions in the chat box. And I'm going to try to moderate that, and we'll circle back to those questions when we open up for the Q&A. So with that, we're going to kick off our first day, which is our Federal Legislative and Regulatory Day, with our legislative update. So I've got a few remarks to begin, and then I'm going to turn it over to Brian Brindle, our Director of Policy and Legislative Affairs. So with that, in a year unlike any other in recent history, our industry has faced challenges and had some triumphs while we battled COVID-19. In a typical year, the American Horse Council monitors anywhere from 100 to 200 pieces of legislation that may affect our industry in some form or fashion. These range from issues on labor to tax, sports betting, disease mitigation, professional certifications, sports, youth, transportation, to name just a few. The process by which a bill can become a law is rarely predictable and can vary significantly from bill to bill. In fact, for many bills, the process will not follow the sequence of congressional stages that are often understood to make up the legislative process. Congressional action on bills is typically planned and coordinated by party leaders in each chamber, though majority party leaders in the House have more tools at their disposal with which to set the floor agenda than do the majority party leaders in the Senate side. In both chambers, much of the policy expertise resides in the standing committees, in panels of members who typically take the lead in developing and assessing proposed legislation within specified policy jurisdictions. Over the course of about the next hour, you will hear Brian, our Director of Policy and Legislative Affairs, speak to the variety and diversity of the issues we tackled in 2020 and a handful of issues that are on the table thus far in 2021. I'll be candid and say, with the change in administration and with the civil unrest and the pandemic still being addressed, things in early 2021 have moved a little bit slower, at a little bit slower pace. So we only have a handful of things to talk about that are like on the table presently. Brian's got a great lineup of guest speakers. He's got some congressional staff. He's got some of our partners in other coalitions that are going to help complement some of the things he's going to talk about. So I'm excited to hear from them. You are also going to hear about our new congressional scorecard. We compile an annual scorecard to educate and inform the equine community about members of Congress' record of support for equine legislation. The scores are based on their votes on key legislation and tracks the co-sponsors on crucial pieces and sign-on letters that they've added on to that we're in support of. So lots of great content to go from there. Brian, if you will unmute yourself and give me just a second to
All right.
I've got everybody admitted that has signed in so far. It looks like I'm good there. Brian, just so you know, there are 35 people in the audience.
Very good.
To give you an idea. And again, folks, please be sure to use the chat feature to submit any questions, and we'll circle back to those when we open up for the Q&A. So Brian, you all set?
Yeah, I sure am. Thank you very much, Julie.
Okay.
So good morning, everybody. Just so you know, I'm presenting here at the AHC headquarters in downtown Washington. And in my walk-in this morning, I would say things are almost pretty much back to normal. There's a lot of heavy traffic, and Congress is actually back after having taken 3 weeks off for the Memorial Day recess. So things are slowly, getting back to normal, at least here in the Capitol. To get a clear picture of where the legislative agenda is headed this year, it's worth taking a good look at where we've been. Despite the disruptions caused by the pandemic in 2020, the horse industry stepped up to fight for the agenda already in place, and that was a big one, by the way. Most importantly, the industry also doubled down to work on the largest pandemic and economic relief packages ever to move through Congress in our history. To recap 2020, let's just take a look at a few highlights. In the area of equine-assisted services, the industry chalked up 2 big victories. The first was allocation of substantial funds for EAS programs at the Department of Veterans Affairs. The other was final passage of the Whole Veteran Act. This is a law which will authorize a study to analyze the effectiveness of treatments for veterans, including EAS. Next up was enactment of the Great American Outdoors Act. In late July, lawmakers passed this historic trails and conservation bill. This package incorporated priorities on which the horse industry has lobbied steadily for the past 3 years. These include key provisions to address trails maintenance and conservation measures that promote riding. In the wake of the pandemic closures, the industry sought and gained CARES Act flexibility. That was the massive relief package passed in late March of last year. The horse industry and its allies successfully advocated for flexibilities to the landmark law. These include an increase for charitable deductions and a set aside of funds for small and rural banks. Industry also gained a clarification from SBA that racetracks would be eligible for the Paycheck Protection Program. They were actually excluded from the original language. We also gained paycheck protection eligibility for Schedule F filers, and this would benefit many American farmers. The industry also won flexibility in the tax area. Late last year, Congress extended the 3-year depreciation incentive for racehorses through the end of 21. On the guest worker visa front, the industry still gained some flexibilities, at least on paper, despite high unemployment. To that end, industry advocated for H-2B cap flexibility for FY21. The final bill authorized a 2-fold increase of H-2B guest worker visas allowed by federal law. Those are just some quick highlights from last year. Please note the horse industry benefited from congressional champions, as Julie alluded to about the scorecard, as well as a robust grassroots network. These champions and grassroots network helped us push many of these bills across the finish line. To that end, please listen to the following information about the Congressional Cavalry, the industry's grassroots network. By signing up for the Cavalry, you can join the thousands of horsemen and women who send letters to Capitol Hill every year to fight for our agenda. So Julie, if we could roll the clip and let everyone learn more about the Cavalry.
If you share a passion for horses, it's important for all of us to be aware of the federal issues that surround and impact horses, as well as the industry that involves them. Your voice, your involvement, your ability to take action when Congress or federal agencies are making decisions is crucially important to shaping the future for the horses we love and care for. Not sure how you can help? Join the American Horse Council's Congressional Cavalry today. It's our grassroots network of members, and it's free to folks like you. Join the Congressional Cavalry today and let your voice be heard.
Good, yeah. And just so you know, for a relatively small association or industry, we have a very robust program. One of the assets we bring to the table in any coalition we join is the fact that our partners can count on hundreds of letters coming from horsemen and women to support the bills that we fight for. So if you're not part of the cavalry, please go to our website and join it. So now let's talk about the congressional scorecard. In addition to deploying grassroots, the horse industry has worked closely with diverse lawmakers to move the agenda forward. During the last election season, industry groups vetted congressional candidates for campaign contributions. The degree of a candidate's support for the industry drives this vetting process. As the umbrella group of the equine sector, AHC has a history of working with and identifying lawmakers who champion issues that unite us all. This places AHC in the unique position to develop a high-level scorecard for lawmakers based on their track record of support. Ultimately, we hope this is a tool that will highlight news that you can use when you go back to the polls in 2022. Last year, while reviewing the record from the 116th Congress, AHC analyzed 24 bills supported by the industry and identified their champions. From this broad pool of lawmakers, AHC compiled a bipartisan list of those who co-sponsored multiple bills that we support. Examples of issue areas where champions have built a strong track record include animal welfare, equine-assisted services, guest worker visa flexibility, tax, public trails access, and electronic logging device flexibility. Leadership on conservation issues also emerged as a major factor in the scorecard. Using the ledge record as a metric to pinpoint strong candidates, we applied other measures. These include membership on key committees. As you know, Congress divides its workload among dozens of committees of jurisdiction. Those that are important to the horse industry include the committees on agriculture, natural resources, and appropriations, just to name a few. Other metrics moving forward will assign points on whether or not a lawmaker represents a major horse state. AHC will also give credit to members of the Congressional Horse Caucus in the House. Industry champions in Congress demonstrate geographic and political diversity. This is very important. To illustrate this reality from the last Congress, I will highlight 4 lawmakers who emerged as standout supporters. First up is Senator Susan Collins of Maine, winner of this year's Roll-Up Award. This New England centrist is consistently a much sought after swing vote on major issues that make headlines. That said, she is also a reliable champion on a variety of equine issues. These include guest worker visa flexibility, ELD flexibility, and trails legislation. Senator Collins also maintains a long-standing open door policy with Down East horsemen and women. Senator Collins won a very tight race in 2020, and we are glad she will continue to serve for the next several years. To learn more about Senator Collins, please join us Friday for the Roll-Up Award. Industry champions like the sector itself demonstrate geographical diversity, like I said. On that note, Senator Michael Bennet of Colorado plays a leading role in the Rocky Mountain region. Not surprisingly, this Western lawmaker has his fingerprints on a variety of trails and conservation bills. He is also championing ELD flexibility. Mr. Bennett's place on the Ag Committee made him a natural partner. Lawmaker number 3 shouldn't be a big surprise to anyone. Over the past several years, Congressman Andy Barr of Kentucky has co-chaired the Congressional Horse Caucus and led the charge on some very important tax issues. Mr. Barr's signature initiative, however, focuses on its championship of equine assisted services for American veterans. We will talk a little more about EAS and next steps later in the program. Next up is another longtime leader that the industry can always rely on. As co-chair of the Congressional Horse Caucus, Congressman Paul Tonko of New York keeps an open door policy to members of the horse sector. Mr. Tonko won re-election last fall and will continue to be a very important partner. Now, speaking of industry champions, we have a special guest joining us today. Please help me in welcoming Haley Brower from the office of Senator Mark Warner of Virginia. As a legislative aide, Haley leads the senator's efforts on the Prevent Dull Soaring Tactics Act, among other issues. With that, Haley, I'll turn it over to you to get your perspectives from Capitol Hill. And thank you very much for joining us today.
Of course.
Haley, the floor is all yours.
Okay, great. It's good to be here. Thank you for including me and we'll enjoy the opportunity to speak with all of you and help answer some questions. Just as a little background about myself, as Brian said, I work for Senator Mark Warner as a legislative aide. I'm originally from Northern Virginia, and I've been working in the Senate for about 4 years now. As Brian mentioned, handle the senator's animal welfare portfolio. So that includes Senator Warner's work on the PAST Act and other horse-related policies. I also work on some other issues, including education and workforce for the senator. But really just enjoy the opportunity here today to talk about some of the recent work that Senator Warner has done to prevent horse soaring. We've worked very closely with Senator Crapo's office on this issue. And so on behalf of both Senator Warner and Senator Crapo, I can say that they are very excited to move legislation forward on these issues. I think one of the topics that I wanted to mention was a recent letter that Senator Warner and Senator Crapo sent to the Biden administration. We were excited to see that that letter got almost half of the Senate to sign on in support. The letter urged Secretary of Agriculture Vilsack to publish and reinstate a final rule that was actually developed years ago when he served under the Obama administration, and the rule was announced in 2017, and it would have put policies in place to help eliminate horse soaring. And that rule was reinstated, or it was not officially reinstated because of delays with the federal registrar, and it was not officially published. And now that Secretary Vilsack is back as Agriculture Secretary, Senator Warner and Senator Crapo see a really vital opportunity to push this forward again, given the previous support under the Obama administration. So we were able to have 47 senators sign on in support. And so we were just excited to see the enthusiasm in the Senate. The letter was bipartisan. Senators from across the country in both parties along the entire political spectrum were very supportive of these efforts. And so it looks like we may see some progress over the next few years on this issue in particular, given that we seem to have an ally in the administration. As you all know, these efforts are a very common sense and have been a long time coming. Senator Warner initially introduced the PAST Act, which is very similar back during the 114th Congress in 2013. and has reintroduced this bill every Congress since then. He initially introduced the bill with former Senator Kelly Ayotte, and now Senator Crapo is his partner in this effort. And so I think Senator Warner sees these efforts to prevent horse soaring as kind of a two-pronged approach where the easiest way to kind of eliminate these harmful practices would be to have the Biden administration reinstate this rule. But the Senator's PAST Act is more comprehensive, and we see as a longer term solution in case there is a future administration that is not as supportive of these policies. We want to allow Congress the opportunity to act and sign this legislation into law instead of relying on administrative action. So we hope to reintroduce the PAST Act over the next few weeks. We're actually currently in the process of collecting co-sponsors and have had resounding support from both parties in Congress so far. So just given the large number of senators who are in support of the bill, it takes a little while to get them all officially signed on. But we're very excited about that. I'm happy to keep everyone updated on the exact date for reintroduction. And we just look forward to continuing the work that both senators have done over the past few Congresses. I can also put in the chat here some more information about the letter I discussed. And then I also will put my email in the chat if anyone has any questions about the PAST Act or anything related to horse policy that is coming out of Congress. As Brian mentioned, there is a lot going on, and we want to make sure that the focus stays on these issues. As I mentioned before, do think that there is a real opportunity for progress, especially given that there has been the political divide has increased over recent years. This is something I think a lot of members see as a real opportunity to work on something that's bipartisan and that is long overdue. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone may have related to Senator Warner's efforts, Congress as a whole, anything on the legislative end, but I'll turn it back to Brian to see if there's a way in which we want to do that.
So if you have a, excuse me, if you have a question, please put it in the chat so we can be sure and sort of get to everyone's question. Haley, thank you so much for joining us today. My quick question for you is, have you heard a response from USDA to your request to move forward with the Horse Protection Act? Any reaction from Secretary Vilsack or anyone over there?
We have not heard yet. I expect that we will hear soon. I think that they are likely just being inundated with requests in similar letters. I expect that we will definitely get a response, just given the number of senators who have signed on in support. We've clearly shown that there is a lot of interest in this issue. So again, can keep everyone updated once we do have an official response back, but we just don't have one yet. So patiently looking forward to receiving one.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm seeing a bunch of thank yous in the chat, but I'm not seeing any questions. Brian, did you have a follow-up question for Haley you wanted to throw out?
Yeah, Haley, so just on a more general level, the process, moving forward, if any of our members would like to come in and actually meet with you to talk about the PAST Act or other legislation, what are the current protocols in place in the Senate to actually have live meetings?
Yeah, of course. I think probably the best way to meet about the PAST Act or any other legislation that is related or of interest would be by just emailing me. You're welcome to send me an email and request a meeting if the topic that you wish to discuss is not a policy I handle. I'm happy to refer you to one of my colleagues who works on those issues. Some I know overlap. For example, one of my colleagues handles tax policy. To the extent that any issue you may be interested in relates to taxes, he will likely be the one that has more information for you. So feel free at any point to send over an email, whether it's a meeting request or if you just have some more information that you think would be of interest to the senator as we continue to work on these issues. I'm happy to relay that information to him. I can also connect you with the senator's scheduler if there is a meeting or event that takes place in the future that you think would be of interest to Senator Warner. Happy to do that. And similarly, I'm happy to connect you with anyone in Senator Crapo's office also. I actually used to work in the same office as Andrew from Senator Crapo's office, who is the other staffer that's leading these efforts for the PAST Act for him. So email is the best way, and otherwise we have received a lot of outreach, especially from constituents in Virginia through the senator's website. That is the best way to reach our office directly if you just have a legislative policy that is of interest to you and want to make sure to communicate your views on the issue.
Right. Another question that we've been talking about internally in the industry is obviously Senator Warner has stepped up to the plate several times to support this bill. It looks like you're on a fairly definite timeline to reintroduce. Can you share whether or not you foresee any major changes to the text that might be offered later this month?
Yeah, of course. I think for right now, we have, as many of you may be aware, there was discussions about changes to the bill over last Congress. I think that right now the plan is to reintroduce the bill as is and with very similar, if not the same text as last Congress, and introduce the bill as a marker if there are changes down the line that make the bill more likely to pass. I think the senator is always in favor of looking at potential changes to make sure that there's as much support as possible among stakeholder groups, constituents, and members to make sure that we do make progress on this issue and not just reintroducing the bill for the sake of reintroduction. But at the moment, the senator is very supportive of the bill that he's introduced over the past few Congresses, and we've enjoyed the opportunity to get as much support as we have. So I think we see this Congress as a real opportunity to move this legislation forward, and have gotten resounding support from stakeholder groups. So at the moment, we're planning on reintroducing the same bill, and once it's in its final form and ready for introduction, again, I can send that around so that everyone can take a look.
Right. And one more issue. So obviously the atmosphere, the environment has been fairly divisive this year. A lot of major initiatives have stalled. So it's really encouraging to actually be able to work on something that's bipartisan in nature. Can you just talk to us a little bit about some of the provisions and general policies underlying the PAST Act that make this very bipartisan and diverse, if you will, in its supporters?
Yeah, of course. I think that this bill, as I've mentioned, is very common sense in protection of horses. It just puts additional kind of safeguards to ensure that horses are being protected and the industry isn't taking advantage of these animals. And that is kind of goes beyond politics and something that members from all parts of the political spectrum and both sides of the aisle can stand behind. It's not very political in its face. I think that almost everyone can agree that this is a good common sense approach. And we also have just gotten the opportunity to get support from many different stakeholders. So I think that when members are taking a look at the bill, they can see that this has been thoroughly vetted. There are many groups who are in support of the bill. And it also helps that Senator Warner and Senator Crapo have gotten the opportunity to work very closely on this bill, that it's a good faith effort between those senators and the members who have introduced the bill on the House side as well, that I think they can trust that we are not trying to pull a fast one on anyone, that both members are just really looking to make the bill as good as possible and really push it across the finish line. And so as opposed to some other areas, this really is very focused on policy and what will be best for the welfare of these horses, and not there's no it's not driven by politics at all. So we've really enjoyed the process of making sure it remains that way, and I think ultimately that's what will help the bill get passed.
Right. Well, just to underscore the fact that we lobby and advocate on issues that unite the industry, and this is certainly one of them. It's our major, most important equine welfare initiative at this time. Back in March, we launched grassroots and supported circulation of the Senator's Horse Protection Act letter, which you talked about earlier, and was wondering how long you kept that open, talk about the process moving forward, and the kind of, I guess, a more detailed specific response you got. And if you see that, this is a two-part question actually, if you see that as sort of a prelude to what we'll be dealing with the PAST Act introduction.
Yeah, I do think it will be kind of the first step in the process and what we're looking at for the PAST Act reintroduction. Just with the process, we kept the letter open for signatures for a few weeks, just given the number of members who are interested in supporting these efforts and the number of senators that we had supporting the PAST Act. We reached out to members who were co-sponsors of the PAST Act last Congress because we knew that they were already interested in these initiatives, and we got a very good response from almost all of them, very interested in signing this letter. We also reached out to members who are new this Congress that were recently elected, and we're happy to see that we got support from them as well. So the coalition of support is growing, and it's, I think, just from my experience working on other issues in the animal welfare space and beyond, it is very challenging to get 47 members to sign one letter. And I think that just speaks to the importance of this issue, and the awareness the members have that this is a worthwhile cause. And so we worked very closely with Senator Crapo's office to make sure that members had the opportunity to sign on and just garner as much support as possible. I think that will be a very similar process to our approach with the PAST Act. We've reached out to several offices already and have gotten support from many of them already. We've also been working very closely with other groups, and they've reached out to encourage members to support the bill again. And sometimes offices will come back to us with questions that the senator may have about the bill. We'll help answer those. But as I mentioned, we we plan to introduce a bill that is the same as last year. And so if the senator has already signed on in support, it's usually a bit easier a process, but they're happy to support it again. We are excited to introduce soon. As I mentioned earlier, it really just is a matter of how quickly we can hear back from senators with everything else going on. I think the past year and a half has affected everyone in many ways, and has been a very difficult past few months that Congress was really mostly focused on COVID relief efforts over the past few months. And senators were still very much focused on the priorities that they had before that, but there's just a lot of priorities to juggle, and most legislation that passed was these COVID relief bills. So I think there's a renewed energy in the Senate and Congress more generally to start focusing on some of these priorities that senators really wanted to push through before the pandemic hit. Now that there is still a lot of work to be done related to the pandemic, but it's not as urgent of a need anymore, just given the progress that we've made over the past year. So something like the PAST Act that does have a lot of support. These are the types of efforts the Senate is very excited about, looking to see that that efforts in Congress can be more bipartisan. We've got bipartisan support for the first 3 COVID relief bills. And so even though there is disagreement on some hot button issues recently, we've seen over the past year that there can be good bipartisan support, and especially in the horse protection and animal welfare space. As you all know, it's something that all members can get behind. So excited to pass the bill and jointly, we kind of see it as 2 sides of the same coin, encouraging the Biden administration to reinstate the rule and pass the bill, focused on both of those efforts.
Haley, I just have one more question came across the queue. We've talked a lot about grassroots. Could you just give us a very brief overview of the role that plays inside your office and the sort of response you've gotten from Virginians with respect to horse protection issues?
Yes, we have gotten a lot of outreach from Virginians on horse protection issues. I think that our outreach has mostly been in the form of emails that Virginia constituents have sent the senator's office. So we've seen a lot of outreach on the PAST Act in particular, about other horse-related issues. And each week the senator sees how much outreach there has been on any particular issue. Actually, any issue related to animal welfare more generally is usually one of the top issues. There's a lot of grassroots support for these issues in Virginia, and that really makes a difference in how Senator Warner thinks about these issues, and one of the primary reasons why the senator became interested in being the lead sponsor on the PAST Act in the first place. Just saw a lot of support among Virginia constituents. And beyond that, we do have, I take several meetings on these issues, and any outreach that Senator Crapo's office gets as well. We consult regularly. So we really have seen a lot of support on the grassroots level, and in this area in particular, that's probably the primary driver of the senator's decisions.
Great. Haley, thank you very much for joining us this morning. That was very helpful, especially the feedback on the grassroots front. And we're very grateful to Senator Warner for taking the lead once again on such a great issue. So we appreciate your participation.
Of course, thank you, Brian, and thank
you. Feel
you.
free to stay for as long as you can for our meeting, please.
Thanks, Haley. We really appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Right, everyone. So let's shift to other issues that are emerging in 2021. We've just heard a lot about horse protection and the PAST Act, where Congress has actually been off to a fairly slow start this year, as Julie mentioned earlier this morning. In addition to advocating for horse protection, there are other issues gaining traction. There are bills focusing on guest worker visas, public land access, pandemic rebuild, and even more resources for equine assisted services. We can chalk these items up to new advocacy and unfinished business from last year. As mentioned briefly earlier, the FY21 spending bill did create some flexibility for H-2B visas by effectively doubling the cap of 66,000. Unfortunately, federal regulators have not exercised their full discretion this year to deliver meaningful relief. On May 25th, DHS announced it would allocate a disappointing 22,000 supplemental visas above those already issued pursuant to federal law. The horse industry and its allies are also advocating for a longer-term solution to guest worker labor demand. This time, we are looking forward to fighting for a specific bill that will be offered tomorrow. This will be known as the H-2B Returning Worker Exception Act, to be offered by Congressman Henry Cuellar of Texas. This is actually a promising bill being championed by an important Democrat that we'll talk more about later. On the H-2A guest worker front, AHC has been working closely with the office of Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina to move a narrow bill focusing on definitions of labor. The working text offered by the American Horse Council clarifies that labor performed in the care of equines would qualify for the H-2A program. If you'd like to learn more details about the fight for more guest worker visas, please join us for the Racing Committee meeting on Wednesday. On the trails front, on April 21st, Senators Martin Heinrich, a Democrat from New Mexico, and Shelley Moore Capito, a Republican from West Virginia, reintroduced the Simplifying Outdoor Access for Recreation Act. The legislation would streamline the permitting process. Importantly, it would also consolidate permits for single trip on public lands managed by multiple federal agencies. Another important bill to drop this year includes the Recreation Not Red Tape Act. Senator Ron Wyden, a Democrat from Oregon, reintroduced this bill on May 27th. Like the Simplifying Outdoor Access Act, this bill would streamline the recreation permitting process. It would also promote voluntarism to address backlog trails maintenance. Please note that on June 24th, the office of Senator Moore Capito of West Virginia will address AHC's youth group fly-in. Remarks will focus on trails and conservation bills moving this year. To learn even more about ongoing advocacy on these issue areas, please join us for the Recreation, Trail, and Land Use Committee meeting on Wednesday morning. Moving into the tax area, one key bill worth mentioning is the Main Street Tax Certainty Act of 2021. This important bill would preserve the 20% small business deduction for so-called pass-through entities, which is set to expire in 2025. Because most equine operations classify as small business, it's important that Congress keep this deduction. Many of the deductions from the 2017 tax reform law have been examined to offset costs for an infrastructure package. In that respect, the horse industry and its allies could be playing some defense on tax policy this year, although the threat on that front isn't quite as intense as it might have been earlier this year, as we had reported in some of our meetings. Earlier, we talked about Congressman Barr and funding for equine assisted services for veterans. It's worth repeating that moving into 21, the horse industry will continue to push for robust funding of the program. Barr's current provision recommends $5 million. This is more than double the amounts allocated in years past. On June 24th, equine youth groups will hear the latest on funding bills from Hill staff and learn more about potential growth for EAS. Earlier, we did talk some about the campaigns focusing on economic relief measures in the wake of the shutdowns. Although the political appetite for another massive relief package is waning, AHC and its allies continue to reach out to federal officials. Most of our discussions focus on possible remedies, especially under already existing authority. In late April, The horse industry and its partners submitted a letter to the SBA requesting guidance on the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant Program. This is a multi-billion-dollar fund aimed primarily at shuttered indoor venues such as theaters. The coalition requested a SBA guidance to clarify eligibility for outdoor venues such as racetracks and horse shows. Later, we will hear from Dr. John McClelland, founder of the Economic Bridge Coalition, to learn his insights into the art of the possible on Capitol Hill. In other news related to pandemic recovery, AHC joined allies from the Sports Coalition on a PSA recommending a safe return to sporting events. In a few minutes, we'll talk with John Nabavi from the National Football League. So Julie, please roll the PSA for those who may not have caught it on TV or social media when it debuted at the end of March. This was a good one.
I'll find you.